My name is Kota Mizutani. I am with the Japanese Americans here in the United States. Thank you for coming back to participate and to watch our young adult panel. Just so everyone knows, we are going to display the slides for this panel in Spanish. That's what we were able to translate before coming here, but we will primarily be speaking in English. Thank you for working with us and for your patience on that. Okay, so we're going to have today a panel of young folks from different Nikkei communities. We're going to have a discussion about what it's like to be a young Nikkei in different parts of the world, and what are the kinds of things that we want to do together to build a global youth Nikkei community. That sound good to everybody? Thank you for the responses. Okay. So, without further ado, I'd like to bring out the four panelists, and they're going to introduce themselves. But before I introduce them, I just want to give a quick note, and it's kind of a personal note for me. As I mentioned earlier, this is my first time at COPANI. Who is this the first time that they're at COPANI? A lot of people. So this is all very new to me, speaking to other Nikkei who don't speak my language but look like me and understand what it's like to be a Nikkei. That's a very new thing. So the conversations that we're going to have today, for some people who have been to COPANI before, it might be very basic. But for us, we are building bridges by having these conversations. So we hope that you follow us in that discussion, in that conversation. Okay? All right. So we're going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves very quickly.
Hello. Hi everyone, my name is Miki. I am from Canada and I'm a Gosei, 5th generation Japanese Canadian. And I am a director on the National Executive Board of the National Association of Japanese Canadians, and I'm the chair of the Young Leaders Committee.
Hi everyone, my name is Mieko Kuramoto. I'm a Yonsei. I'm from the United States, and I am the National Youth Rep to the National Youth Student Council of the Japanese American Citizens League.
Young people know a lot about technology.
Hello everyone. Olá, que tal? Olá Brasil. My name is Marisa Sato. I am from Brazil. Presidente Prudente. I am a member of Seinembu Hansoro, which is the youth department of the League of Sorocabana. It's been located in the São Paulo state inland. So I would like to say some words. It's fast. I'd like to thank the entire Mr. Hirojoyama for inviting me for this panel, youth panel. And also the young leaders for supporting me. It's a pleasure. My English is so forgive me if I made some mistake. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Leandro Uba, and everybody calls me Leo. I'm from Argentina, and nice to meet you.
Okay, thank you. And just another reminder that if we could have as much silence as possible, I know this is a very big room, and the noise does travel very fast, so thank you for your patience. Okay, so the format of this panel, and what we're going to do, I have 4 questions that I'm going to ask each of the panelists, here today. And then we're going to have an opportunity for you to ask us questions. And then we're going to have a short video presentation about an exciting project that some of the young Nikkei from around the world are already working on. So look out for that. Okay? David, if we could get the first slide. So my first question is, when did you realize, or when did you become aware of your Nikkei identity?
Okay, so I think I have one of the more unique experiences in Canada, which is, that's because my grandfather, who spoke Art Miki yesterday about the Nikkei Canadian experience, was very active during redress, and I was born 5 years after the redress agreement was completed. So I always kind of grew up knowing about my history, which I think is very unique in Canada, because I think a lot of kids grow up not knowing and having to kind of self-explore once they're in the university age demographic. I mean, I was always involved in my community as a kid doing odori and language class, but when I was 11 years old, I did my French speech about the Japanese-Canadian internment and about redress. So that's kind of when I did more research into my history.
So I was born in Los Angeles. I'm Mieko, again, by the way. But I was born in Los Angeles, and then my family moved when I was very young to Milwaukee. So how many of you know where Milwaukee is? Right, it's a huge city, very touristy, lots of attractions. That's a joke, it's not, it's very small. And it's in the Midwest. I didn't grow up with a lot of other Asian Americans. Most of my friends who were Asian American were second generation Korean American. They grew up speaking Korean, and they were very connected to their roots in Korea. And I never really fit in with that, so I didn't really know if I was Asian enough to call myself Asian American. And I didn't know any other Nikkei who shared the same experience as I did, because also I'm fourth generation. And so it wasn't until I graduated high school and I went to, on kind of a fluke, I went to the first JSTL National Convention I'd ever been to. And for the first time, I'm in a room full of other people who look like me, who have similar backgrounds as me, whose families also went through the camp experience, who are fourth and fifth generation. And for the first time, I felt like I was incorporated in an Asian community where I could fully claim myself as part. So it wasn't really until I was about 18 that I really considered myself part of the Asian American community, and that my Nikkei identity was something that was important. But here we are a few years later, and it's a really big part of my life. So that's kind of how I realized my Nikkei-ness.
In my case, my parents has raised me as the Japanese traditional, following the Japanese traditions. So I'm very easy to read. When I was 9 years old, my mother enrolled me in the Japanese language course, and besides that, she always participated in the Fujinkai, the human department of our Nikkei association in my town, which is near Presidente Prudente. So I always feel myself different since I was a child. Different from the other Brazilian children, because I am so immersed in this culture. So that's it.
Well, in my case, I think there wasn't like a particular moment in my life where I realized that I was Nikkei. Actually, when I was a kid, I barely even know what a Nikkei means. I never heard that word. So, I also remember that when people told me why do I have my eyes like this, I used to say that when I was younger, I used to play to be Chinese. So I pulled my eyes like this too long, and they stay like that. And that's like a true story, because I really believe that. I didn't have Nikkei friends. I went to an English bilingual school, so I was the only Nikkei there. But they never treat me different, or they never make me feel like that I was Asian or something like that. So, but then I started going to some events for like this, what we call intercambios in Latin America, and I started like going, and suddenly I was like really deep involved, and for me it's not like a particular time, it's like a whole process that it's still going, and my identity is like evolving.
Wow. So that's really interesting. There are a lot of different answers. People realize their identity or think of their identity in many different ways. And yet, we're all here today in the same place. We all are very interested in being Nikkei. That's something that we think about. So you kind of touched on this, Leo, but if some of the other panelists too want to talk about how you realize that you're Nikkei, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you become active in the community. So how did you become, was there a person, or was there an event, or how did you get involved in this community? Because there are so many people like us who aren't part of their communities.
So how I got involved, I mean, as I said before, I was always sort of involved through my family and through my local community, but I started to become more involved nationally when I attended a youth conference in my city. We were hosting, so I got told to help. Voluntold, as we call it. And I met a lot of Japanese Canadians from across the country that were around my age, and that we were able to connect. But what really got me involved was that I joined the committee, the National Young Leaders Committee, but then the guy who was in charge decided to step down, and there was no one that really wanted to replace him. And I felt like he did a lot of important work in terms of intergenerational conflicts and trying to bridge the gap, and try to show and explain that the youth are very active and that they do want to be a part of our community. And I felt that if no one took over, that a lot of that work would go away. So I kind of felt like I should get involved and become the chair and sit on the national board so that I can continue that work and to continue to bring people together, because that's why I come to these conferences, is to meet other people around my age that I can connect with, and I want that experience to happen for all the Nikkei around the world.
Bueno, para ser un poco más justo, para los que no hablan inglés, voy a contestar en español. De cómo me metí en la comunidad Nikkei. Y como dije antes, yo quería ser parte de algo con gente similar como yo, como otros asiáticos americanos que no sé, no son exactamente vinculados con esa experiencia de inmigración. Y con el JCL me sentía como es una organización de derechos civiles, civil rights y justicia social, and social justice. Antes, cuando yo crecía, nunca había encontrado con otros asiáticos americanos que fue como políticas. I never met, my only experience with other Asian Americans had been very apolitical. No había otra gente que le importaba las políticas, pero cuando llegué a la convención por la primera vez, fue un año en que los jóvenes pasaron una resolución sobre las reparaciones para esclavitud acá en los Estados Unidos. And it was a year that the Youth Council was, it's actually a resolution that Kota helped author, was passing an agreement to support reparations for slavery. And eso fue algo que me llamó la atención mucho, porque fue algo que es como un puente entre nosotros y una comunidad que nos ayudó un montón durante nuestra jornada hacia redress o reparaciones. Así que me metí porque quería ser parte de algo como mayor, como algo que es un movimiento hacia algo que se base también en nuestra experiencia de los campos. So it's very important to me that I was part of a group that was using our experience in the camps and using our experience with intergenerational trauma to be reaching out and supporting other movements and other social justice movements. And I continue to be proud of the JCL for doing that today. So that's what got me involved.
Well, as I live surrounded by Japanese culture since childhood, I have been participating in my Nikkei association as a voluntary, and recently I have been my greatest job, which is singing karaoke. So I have always liked the Japanese culture in arts, especially singing, dancing, but I was very shy, and I began kind of late doing these kind of things. But when I began, I loved it, and I have the opportunity to know a group in Presente Prudente, which they have made a Yosakoi Soran workshop. Then my cousin, which was a member of this group, she invited me to do that, and I was, yes, I will go. So I entered in this group through this workshop, and this group, which name was Seikyo Seninkai, has another group which the same members, and they are Seinenbu Hansoro. Seinenbu Hansoro makes other kind of projects, not in artistic focus. It's bigger projects. It's about to renovate and to help Nikkei associations, and that was so touching for me to do that kind of work for my community. So I joined it, and my Nikkei identity grows much more after that. That's it.
Sorry, David, if you could switch to the third slide, number 3. Okay. So we all have different ways of getting. I very much relate to Alex's story too. That sometimes you go to an event, and by the end of the event, you are the executive director of the event. That happens. Just to share my own personal story, I got involved, I can name a single person who who really got involved. When I first became involved with the Japanese American community, I didn't know anything about our history. And there was an elderly woman in the community that took me under her wing and kind of told me about the Japanese American history. And I had no idea that anything had ever happened to Japanese Americans at any point in time. I just didn't know. And as soon as I figured that out, it was just like one point where I realized that it is because of those people that I am here today. So that's how I got involved with the community. So there are a lot of different ways that we can all get involved. But I'm curious, we are all leaders, leaders in our own countries, in our own different communities. And we organize and we think about identity and we think about ourselves in different ways. So the next question is, how do you build community among youth in your respective countries or your areas?
So for us, for the Young Leaders Committee, we try and have as many programs and supporting young leaders across the country. One thing that we're really proud of is the Young Leaders Fund. So we do have money for young Japanese Canadians who have maybe a project or an event that they want to start organizing, but they need some funding and they don't know where to go, they don't know how to start. They can apply for our fund and we give them money and any sort of resources or help that they need. So we have around 3 projects a year that we support, and they're really amazing when you really think about it. Last year we had someone from BC who constructed an old tea hut using, he went to Japan to buy wood, and then he used some old wood from the old Japantown in BC, which is no longer there, to construct a tea hut and perform ceremonies under the advisement of some professionals in the area. So that's just one of the examples of one of the projects that young leaders around the country are doing. But in terms of, we do conferences as well, which is really helpful, again, to meet other people. But I think in the future, it's great to have more conferences like this because we try and deal with a lot of our own issues in the Japanese Canadian community, but I know there's a lot of, we don't even know, this is the first time I'm meeting Japanese Americans, Japanese South Americans, and it's really important to figure out what their challenges are and figure out what they do best and what we do good and how we can share those experiences.
All right, I guess I'll start a new question. So on the National Youth Student Council, or the NYSC, we try to cultivate this kind of open dynamic where we're a group of people who are diverse. We're not all Japanese American, which is important as well, but we're bound together by a sense, kind of a set of values and a sense of importance in the work that we do. And a big part of our programming are summits. And the summits are kind of an undertaking of each youth rep individually. And they come to us and they say, in my area, I would really like to talk about, for example, feminism in the Asian American community. That was a summit we did at a women's college. Or I would really like to talk about the issues of anti-blackness and Asian American identity. And it's really the diversity of ideas that we have, and then we support those ideas, that brings us together. And it creates kind of a feeling of mutual support and really family. I would say that I've come to consider a lot of my the other members of the NYSC like my family members. And I think what really strengthens us in our community is our willingness to accept the diversity within our youth group.
I'll explain it through Senebo Hansoro's mission. Our mission is to provide continuity of Nikkei associations, always seeking to improve them for future generations, respecting the Japanese culture and values. And through our many projects we are developing in our region, we could get some results already. They are the creation of 3 Nikkeis encouragement in the creation of Bon Odori Festival in 3 associations, encouragement in the creation of regional forum in Nikkei community in 3 regions of Brazil, and it was due to we were showing to mainly for the elders that the saying that the youth can be very responsible and can organize events like that, and we can get their confidence and their support, which is very important, because without support we can do anything. So together with the kaikans, the Nikkeis can make it, can do many events, many projects, and so on.
Okay, well, hearing you guys makes me feel like maybe I'm not that involved in the Nikkei community, but what we do have in Argentina, for example, or in Latin America, is what I mentioned before about these intercambios. They are not directly related to the Nikkei community, but it's like it helps our community because it's like it gives us a purpose for joining. It's just like that. It's not like you don't have to be Nikkei to participate. I'm talking about Argentina's case, but we also have these intercambios in Paraguay, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina. And it's like, it's not Nikkei related, but it gives the Nikkei youth a purpose for joining and building a community.
That's really interesting. I think for us in the JCL in the United States, sometimes it's very similar. People become involved not necessarily because they are Nikkei, but because they really care about the work that we do. So in our youth organization, we have Filipino Americans, we've had Vietnamese Americans. They don't have any Japanese blood, but they really care about the Nikkei story. And so they become involved, and they become some of our most active members. Some of our best members are not Nikkei. So it's a very interesting way for people to come together. So the last question that I have for the panelists today is actually a question that we could ask. So raise your hand if you were in the afternoon youth workshop. If you were there for the afternoon youth workshop. Great. So the folks who were there, we split up into different groups based on theme. So the groups were art and culture. That was one group. The next group was history and heritage. We had a group for identity. We had a group for political activism or activism and advocacy. And then we had a group for business and entrepreneurship. So we tried to break down parts of the Nikkei identity. And each group brainstormed ideas of different ways that we can work together in those different topics and those themes. So all of us up here took part in those conversations. There are people in the audience who took part in those conversations. So if you are in the audience and you want to share something that you remember, that you really liked from the discussion, please raise your hand and maybe we can get a microphone to you. Yeah, David's got our microphone in the middle. But we also I want to give a quick chance. Oh, great, we have some hands already. I want to give a quick chance for the people up here to share some of their observations from that workshop. Okay? So anyone who wants to share anything that came out of that workshop, ideas about how we can make
the global Nikkei community. Voy a contestar una en español. En mi caso, lo que puedo observar, nuestro tema fue negocios, business, y algo que surgió no solo en este momento, sino durante todo el día, fue la barrera del lenguaje. Estamos en un evento que abarca todo el continente, e incluso gente de otros países por fuera del continente, y en la mayoría de los casos necesitamos un traductor. En portugués, en inglés, en español, en japonés. Y la realidad es que todos estamos acá por la comunidad Nikkei, por algún interés en particular, pero el nombre del evento lo dice, que es una convención panamericana Nikkei. Y lo que nos relaciona a todos es nuestros ancestros, nuestros antepasados o nuestros orígenes. Entonces, la idea que surgió fue que estaría bueno que este lenguaje, el japonés, fuese único y que podamos venir a una próxima COPANI, un próximo evento de este estilo con un solo idioma. Entonces, hablar todos el mismo idioma y eliminar esa barrera. Para un paso más, que fue el Action Step, que es como tratar de solucionar eso, venía el tema de tratar de que el japonés sea un idioma más insertado en la sociedad occidental. Es común para nosotros, para países latinoamericanos, por ejemplo, que la segunda lengua sea el inglés. Entonces, como que tratar de cambiar ese paradigma y llevarlo a otro idioma, por ejemplo, el japonés.
Vou falar pouquinho em português. A parte que eu escolhi foi de artes e identidade. Saíram muitas ideias boas dessa atividade e o resultado principal foi que a gente pensou num festival global no estilo de Bonodori, junto com outros tipos de festivais juntos, que poderia ter também competições de novas danças de Bonodori, e além de competição também um festival mesmo de mostrar as danças de vários países e ser sediado cada ano em um país diferente. É um sonho, mas não é impossível. E a juventude acho que consegue se reunir para tentar tornar isso ou eventos como esse realidade.
Bueno, yo estaba con el grupo de identidad Nikkei. Un tema que abordamos fue la cuestión del mestizaje, y como una comunidad Nikkei que es diaspórica, enfrentamos esa cuestión de mestizaje, no solo de mestizaje de etnicidad, sino también mestizaje de culturas, y hablamos mucho de los retos que enfrentamos juntos, que aunque sean en otros países, en países distintas, en casas distintas, en familias distintas, hay cuestiones que son muy similares. Y lo más importante que yo entendí de ese grupo es la necesidad de un diálogo sobre qué es de ser de la raza mixta, qué es de ser de culturas mestizas. Porque esa es la realidad para la comunidad Nikkei. No somos puro japonés, no somos puro, lo que sea, argentino, brasileño. estadounidense. Así que yo creo que hay una apertura de oportunidad para nosotros de desarrollar esas conversaciones sobre la mestizaje y nuestra identidad internacional.
So I was one of the moderators for the workshop, so I kind of got the opportunity to kind of look in on all the groups that was going on. And one of the common, I guess, action items that came out of all the groups was a need to share the information and our knowledge and our history and everything that comes with that, because there's so much variety. So as Leo said, in the business side, just having, being able to share through language can be difficult, and I think that's what you said, right? Yeah. I don't know Spanish. Trying to be able to share ideas and overcoming that language barrier. And like Marisa said, having maybe a global festival that we could have that celebrates the different types of odori that we do, different taiko styles, so many different varieties of, our culture, and just needing to share that. And then in the identity one, being able to share, because a lot of us are mixed now, and we have so many different backgrounds, but that I think makes us more interesting, because there's a lot that we can learn from each other, and even within a country, things are kind of more separated and you don't have access to each other. So I think that's one of the main things is how do we share that information with each other? More meetups, maybe more online platform things, just any way that we can communicate with each other, we can be in touch with each other, and learn from each other.
Great. How's everybody doing? I feel like some people are... Nitemasu ka? Are people sleeping? That's all. I'm just gonna stand up because I need to. No more of that. No more. Okay. So at this point, I know there were some people who wanted to contribute to the conversation, so I want to give them that opportunity. But I also wanted to open it up to questions from you. If you have any questions for any of us here or for anyone, please, yes, raise your hand, and David will give you the microphone.
First, I wanted to thank Roger for a great conference here, and it's really enlightening to meet so many from all over Americas, and I'm from the Bay Area. What I want, unfortunately, I don't understand Spanish or Portuguese, so maybe you might have talked about this. But the one thing I didn't hear about at your discussion was something that I think all of us who are older than you really care about and hope that this is our legacy, especially with the JACL, and that's about internment camps. I didn't hear any word about what you had said about internment camps. Maybe you said that in Spanish, but I want to make sure that that's part of your legacy, your future, that you guys talk about that. I mean, is it something of interest that the youth is interested in, that you guys know about? Or is it something that, I'd rather do a pole dancing than talk about internment camps. So if you guys talk about that, I appreciate that, because I know that all of us are involved in, have great interest in internment camps, but I didn't hear it here.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I'll take that. And I do apologize. I did address the issue of internment camps, but I addressed it in Spanish. So I apologize for that. But you bring up a good point. That's one thing that has always brought me back to the JCL has been kind of the way that we base a lot of our activism and what we do today is largely from our experience with the camps. And regardless of what generation you are, or regardless of whether you're Nikkei, you were not part of it, your family wasn't involved, that's something that I think is a great strength of ours, is that the camp experience has kind of transformed into one of our fundamental values about civil rights and about what social justice looks like. And absolutely, I think in the work that the NYSC does, those kinds of values really kind of tie us together. A lot of the questions that we address and take on, we frequently have discussions on calls or at retreats about, what can we bring to this conversation as Japanese Americans? You know, what do we bring to this? We recently had a summit actually about immigration detention on the border and Japanese American incarceration, in which we brought in a speaker and an expert on incarceration and then a speaker and an expert on immigration policy. So that's, I would say that at least for in the JCL, that's something that has always been kind of a fundamental and core tenet, but I absolutely do appreciate that it's an important part of our legacy, and we hope to continue that.
Yeah, I think it is a big part of our generation is to reflect on our history. One of the projects that was done last year by a young Japanese Canadian was asking the question of if the internment happened today, what would you bring with you? And it was called the Suitcase Project. And it was asked specifically to Yonsei and Gosei, Japanese Americans and Japanese Canadians. And it really got them to learn more about the history and to really think about how that experience could affect them. And I think something that maybe a lot of people don't realize is that there is a lot of intergenerational trauma, especially in our community. So the younger generations who weren't directly in the camps still feel a lot of weight from their ancestors and those who went through a lot of trauma. And the fact that there is a lot of shame on the family and that a lot of people didn't talk about it, it really does impact the future generations. So I think even for some youth who maybe don't know a lot about their own history, I think when they do, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, this is why I felt this way, or this is why some things are different, is because of the history that their family has gone through and that has gone down the generation. So it's a big part of our history for sure, and I know that the youth in Canada really value and appreciate the work that our older generation has done, and that's something that they will always pass on.
Yeah, if I could just add to that too, you know, I think the word legacy is very important in that question, because this historical event happened, but the legacy is what we want to take away from that historical event. And so I think for us, our responsibility as young people is for the legacy of the incarceration to be not only that the incarceration occurred, and that it was unjust, and that Japanese Americans and Japanese Canadians and Japanese Nikkei everywhere around the world were affected by it, but that we also didn't let that kind of historical event happen again to anybody. That is the legacy that I think we are trying to build with our programming right now. And as Mieko mentioned, it finds its way into everything that we do because it's so important to why we do what we do. Great question. Thank you.
That was very important. Where our ancestors have experienced affect us to this day. But as youth, we also want to, reconnect based on our culture that has been lost, not lost, but to revive a lot of things that are within our culture. And I think that also comes with sharing our past experiences, our challenges that we've collectively faced as Japanese Pan Americans, Pan Nikkei, in our experience, but to also bring it into the future, to bring our various lived experiences and interpretation of Nikkei culture into the future, which is why I thought it was just so profound when we were able to share about how we celebrate our culture globally, from music to festivals to dancing, and then we were really able to see, the challenges that we face, including, the Gosei and the Yonsei and the younger generations feeling kind of disconnected from their heritage and culture, and also communities kind of feeling separated from one another. So we were able to kind of come up with this idea of how we can share our are the different ways that we express and experience and celebrate Nikkei culture. So I'm really excited about this idea of a global Nikkei arts and culture festival. I think that's really profound that we can also address global issues that we all face collectively, including environmental issues, and to really reconnect with our Japanese culture in regards to that, and to have an impact on people that are facing division, discrimination, and alienation. And I think that to really address these issues that face us all. Thank you.
Do you have some other questions? Oh, we have a hand over here. And please feel free to ask questions in whatever language you feel most comfortable. We'll find a way to get the message across. Yeah.
I apologize. I would also like to respond to the other people who have spoken. I realize we're taking time, but sir, I really want to make it clear that the youth are very aware of the past trauma and don't think it doesn't still affect us. Speaking as a Japanese Canadian from Alberta, which is in the middle of Canada, I'm quite far removed from the Western culture that still has an active connection to Japanese and Nikkei culture. As a Yonsei, the language and everything associated with being a Japanese Canadian was lost in one generation. But as an adult, I was still shamed for not knowing. So how was I to know when it's lost before? And as a youth, it's some of us have the benefit of having a community that we can turn to, and some of us have fewer resources. So feeling ashamed of not speaking Japanese, of not knowing religious customs, of not knowing bon, odori, or obon. I still have not ever attended an obon because it is not within my resources to do so. We have to find these things for ourselves, and we try to, but it's not a fast process. Learning a language is not a fast process, particularly when your relatives are spread across the country because of internment and where they remember growing up and where they want to be. So the reason we focus on the fun aspects of Japanese culture is because we know that's what was taken from us and what we want to experience like our ancestors experienced.
Before you start, I think we might have time to take one more question after you. So
okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I attended the session, and thank you for all. It was a really fun session, very interactive. While our young leaders on the stage didn't actually mention the word internment, I think they really did strongly tell us that they were kind of involved because of the past history. So, So I think in a way that question, I don't think we need to worry that that's going to be forgotten. I think that really is a driving force behind why you guys are up there, so thank you. I also wanted to say that there was a group that was talking just about history, and I guess just due to time pressures, that wasn't mentioned in the summaries on the stage, but it was definitely discussed. So we were also very impressed by the work of the young people in Brazil, because coming from a place where, there are just sort of extremes of wealth and poverty, they were really very actively engaged in all kinds of really hands-on work. So really enjoyed the session. Thank you.
I think I saw a hand up back there.
Yeah, we have time for one more.
Is there someone back here with their hand up? Maybe not. Anyone else?
Oh, we have one more. Yes.
Hi, my name is Miki. I'd like to direct the question to our young leaders up there, and they've done a marvelous job of expressing their issues and how they feel, which is great. The one thing I always hear is that young leaders will get involved with organizations, but later they drop out for one reason or another. I'm going to ask our young leaders, what would you suggest is a way of keeping young leaders involved in any organization? What are the things that perhaps they would offer to some of our leaders so that they have a better idea of how that can happen?
I don't know if I get the question, but I'll try to answer. I think that in order to have it's not survive for an organization to continue, it's to renew its the staff organization. We have experience in Argentina, for example. I talk about Argentina, sorry, because it's my experience, but we have an issue where we cannot attract young people to get into the Centro Nikkei Argentino because we don't have anything that motivates them to come. But we have another branch of the same community that it's this intercambio that I was talking about, that it's it works like a violin. It's like people want to enter because they have a reason to. It's like really nice that you give something to them and they catch it and they say, hey, I wanna come here and do the same thing as you did. So it's like retrospective. It's like you enter, you give them what you have, and the person who receives it, he wants to enter alone. It's like it keeps moving, and in our case it's working. I get out there 4 years ago, and people keeps entering to this stuff, as we call it, and we don't need we don't have to explain them. We don't have to tell them, hey, come here. It's a really nice place. They do it alone, but by their own. So I don't know how to try to extrapolate it to your cases, but I think that it's a matter of motivation.
Just to add to that, I asked the group that was working on identity in our workshop what got you involved and what attracted you. And a lot of people said that finding a community with people that are like them and that come from a similar background was really a reason why they got involved and stayed involved. And it's the same thing with the members of my committee, is that they all wanted to join the committee because they met each other and because they wanted to continue, it's as you said, like a family. It's the friendships that really stay and last forever. My recommendation to the more experienced generations is that support your youth, because there are youth that are there and that want to work and they want to get together and they really do want to be involved, but that means giving them the space to do it, not kind of pressuring them or forcing them into something that they don't want to do, but asking them what would you like to do and how can we help you? Because I feel like even just with some support, it doesn't even have to be financial, but just even saying our center's open if you want to have a youth group, or we can get you in touch with someone who can help facilitate a workshop. Anything like that is very helpful for the next generation. Listen to them, because they're very intelligent and very well thought and well spoken. And yeah, just give them your support and let them know that you're there for them. And it's not them versus us. We're all in this together. You know, the future is here, as the theme is. So yeah, just really support your youth, and they will come and they will stay.
Yeah, I want to echo what Alex said, but the biggest thing for me in coming back to the JCL2 is that young people already have the passion. They'll bring the passion. Just let them use it and give them a way to channel it. So when I first joined, I didn't feel like I knew anything. I didn't know anybody. I wasn't sure if this is for me or if I was qualified to do it. And then Kota said, we need you to do a summit in March. Do it. I'm like, go. And I was like, I don't know, you know, I don't have any ideas. And he was like, yes, you do. You have ideas. What do you want to do? And we'll work with you on it. And, you know, young people come to us because they're passionate about Japanese American history, or they're passionate about seeing social change, or they're passionate about using the camp experience as a stepping stone to do more activism. So young people will bring the passion, but if you give them enough trust to say, I trust you with this event, or I trust you with this program, that means a lot, because it shows them that you care, and that you're facilitating a space where they can help.
It's great. Thank you all so much. So I know we're running out of time, and we want to make sure folks get back to their hotels. David, if you wouldn't mind prepping up the video that we have. So the video that we're about to show was prepared by Jimmy Amemiya, who could not be here at COPANI, but he has been part of a project to create an iPhone app, or a smartphone app, a Nikkei app, if you will. That'll be a way for all of us to connect electronically. So we're going to have that short preview video in just a little bit, but I wanted to thank everybody before we close for staying here, for listening to us. I think if there's one message, if there's one thing that I really hope that all of us can take away from this panel, is the theme of this COPANI. The future is here. The future is now. And the people who are up on the stage are going to be the ones who are running COPANI in the future. So please work with us and trust us, because we look up to you so that we can all work together towards a better future for all Nikkei. So that's it. Yeah. Thank
Part of the youth discussion table of COPANI Lima 2017 team, and I want to present to you the Nikkei App project. In the last COPANI, the youth discussion table team was created with a mission. Can we do something different to the past COPANIs? And how can we do something that can last more than the 2 hours regarding the schedule? During the youth discussion table in 2017 COPANI Lima, we divided the participants in 8 groups so that they behave as a developers team, and applying design thinking methodology provide a solution to the main discussion topic we presented. How to engage the Nikkei youth to the Nikkei community in his or her country. Because the design thinking methodology is based on the end user profile, we presented the groups with 3
Hola. Bueno, algunos ya me conocen, soy Kurokawa de Perú. Fui parte del equipo de la mesa de trabajo de jóvenes de la COPANI de Perú. Disculpen los problemas técnicos, creo que debe ser el internet. Bueno, como ya mencionó Kota, en este video lo que tratábamos de demostrar es la conclusión que se dio del proyecto que la conclusión, que fue el proyecto de la Nikkei App. ¿Qué es lo que queríamos, digamos, lograr un poco con la Nikkei App? Es poder, digamos, ya enlazarnos nosotros cada vez más como comunidad Nikkei en la aplicación, poder en esta aplicación poder estar más comunicados, más conectados, tanto
a young businessman just starting to work, and a 30-plus Nikkei starting his own family, each one of them having different lifestyles, hobbies, and aspirations. So, during the time we had in the discussion table, all the groups started brainstorming ideas. Then, each group selected their best one to present to the other teams and developed it. After the idea development process, each group presented their proposal and everyone voted for the most interesting ideas. This time the idea with the most votes was a mobile app. This was the idea that we, the organizing team, decided to further develop. With that in mind, the next steps were to do a market study via social networks, create a brand, get funding, and prototype the product. Even though the initial idea
pero Roger me indica de que luego vamos a poder pasárselos a todos. No sé si la clausura o algo. Es un video relativamente corto en realidad. Bueno, pero les explico un poco el propósito. Es, como ya les mencioné, estar más comunicados todos. Actualmente, ¿quién no tiene un smartphone? Bueno, en realidad el público de la COPANI generalmente es un poco mayor, pero ya vemos que cada vez más las personas, igual así sean jóvenes o adultos, también tienen smartphones y podrían bajarse la aplicación. La idea es unificar a todas las entidades Nikkei dentro de esto, y además que cada una de las personas de la comunidad Nikkei también pueda estar comunicada aquí, y también involucrar a empresas que puedan difundir sus iniciativas, sus eventos, sus locales, sus servicios a nivel, digamos, de cada país o a nivel, digamos, internacional, dependiendo de sus objetivos o alcances, y poder tenerlo a la mano siempre, ¿no? Cada vez ya la tecnología está avanzando, cada vez estamos cada vez más conectados a través de redes sociales, a través del internet, pero nosotros, digamos, quizás nos estamos quedando un poco atrás en ello, y por ello es que como jóvenes que vimos esa necesidad, ese problema, vimos que sería una excelentísima idea poder desarrollar un tipo de aplicación como es esta, ¿no? Entonces, para la traducción, por favor.
Okay, well, I'll do what I can, but this is the Nikkei App project, which was developed by Carlos and another compañero from Peru. So these are kind of the benefits of what was worked on at the last COPANI. And the purpose of the Nikkei app is it's something you can always have in your hand. And while it's meant for smartphones, the hope is that it will start extending to be accessible for everyone. But the idea is that we can connect Nikkei from around the world, and it allows us to communicate much faster with one another, so that we don't have to wait every 2 years to see each other or find out what the other groups are up to. And the other great thing about it is that your organization or your company, your startup, whatever it may be, can use this app to spread the word about events. So talking about what you're doing, talking about what your ideas are, asking if they want to help publicize for you. So it's really a way to bring us closer as an international community.
Finally, in this part, we realize that this is just an idea right now, but we think with the support of everyone, we could develop the idea and maybe in the near future we could have it real, make it real. So if anybody have ideas, please contact us so we could everything come together and make it possible. So thank you very much.